Welcome to the Sooners 360 Recruiting Podcast, a podcast for OU recruiting fans by Sooners 360. Each week, we catch you up on the latest in OU recruiting news and provide opinions and evaluations on all things OU football recruiting. I'm Chris Mason, lead recruiting analyst for Sooners 360. This podcast is now sponsored by Sooners 360 on Patreon. To support this podcast, please go to patreon.com/Sooners360-817 and click subscribe. It's only $2 a month, and there's also a free trial option. And I'm going to be posting all of my regular recruiting content on Patreon. That link will also be in the podcast show notes. Also, this topic is now part of the Believe podcast family. Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is episode 84, new O-line commit and a commit trio on SEC Day. So this is going to be pretty much a focused news episode. So we're going to jump right to the biggest news and the biggest news of the day. So commitment update. So around 6:30 Eastern time, 5:30 Central, and 4:30 Mountain, Darius Afalava from Skyline, Utah, made his commitment decision on the 247 Instagram live account. And he was down to a Final Four of Oklahoma, in-state school, Utah, Washington, the Huskies, and Michigan State. And Michigan State seems like a little bit of an outlier, but that coaching staff used to be at Oregon State, and Oregon State was heavily recruiting Afalava before they moved to Michigan State. So he had some long-term connections with them. So that's why Michigan State is sort of in there. So the recruiting process for Darius was, in terms of his OU interest, OU was sort of on the periphery of his list until he came and visited unofficially for the OU spring game. That's when OU offered him. He probably sort of had an informal offer, but OU is, and Bill Biedenbauer probably trying to gauge his real level of interest to figure out if OU was going to make a real run at him. He had a great visit for the spring game. Previous OU target, Antonio Ogamora, was also officially visiting for the spring game, and they sort of have a connection. They found out that they sort of had a childhood connection, so they sort of knew each other. So I think that kind of helped ground OU initially. And Afalava had a great, unofficial visit and shuffled some things around and dumped some schools to move OU in for an official visit. So he was looking at Tennessee and LSU, but after looking at OU, he's like, OU's an SEC school. I really liked my unofficial visit. I think OU could be somewhere I click with. So he moved off at least 10. He moved off to LSU, and in some recent post-commit interviews, he said he also moved off Tennessee. So it was down to OU and these other schools. He took a visit to OU on 6/7, 6/8. He visited with Dasan Brom and Cade Pietrek. Just three players. He wasn't part of the bigger weekends that followed. And he after visiting Washington, he set a commit date of June 28th. It was actually a little earlier than most folks had anticipated. Previously, he was going to commit later in the year. So we moved that up, and he chose the Sooners. So his ranking is he's basically, he's on Rivals. He's ranked well. He's a 4-star. He's an established 4-star. He's in their top 300. On the other services, right now he's a high 3. So I think there's a good chance he moves to be a composite 250 across the board. His film's really good. With an OU verbal commitment, there's going to be some more attention. He's definitely going to get some attention, just because of OU's status as a big-time program. And I think very similar to the way that Eugene Brooks kind of rose up the rankings. I think we may see something similar with Afalava. What is OU getting? He is a big he plays both guard and tackle in the film. He's a big, dominating run blocker, just powerful, just leveling guys, pushing them around. He shows on smaller guys in pass rush. He does a good job at pass pro. He's probably an inside. He's a guard, not a tackle, although he's playing really well at tackle in his film, handling small guys and just they're not getting anywhere near the quarterback. One guy makes an inside move and Darius just sort of smashes him to the ground. When he's pulling, it's like a freight train heading, and he's hitting, just leveling guys. There's a couple of goal line series that they show, and the play starts at the 5-yard line, and he's shoving his target into the end zone ahead of the running back. Also does a good job going to the second level. There's a couple of highlights where you can see him, hitting his D-line target and then making a move to get to the next level to hit a linebacker or a DB who he just buries. He's around 6'5", 320, 330. That's kind of what he's listed at, over 300. Carries it really well, based upon the photos that we saw from his official visit, the photo session they did. He's carrying it really well. He probably will play somewhere in the probably in the 320 to 330 range once Schmitty gets hold of him and sheds good weight for bad weight. But he's a big guy. I mean, he's very powerful in the run game. Just really love what he could bring as a guard prospect for OU. What does this mean for OU offensive line recruiting? It's a massive win. When OU lost Antonio Ogamora, they really only had one interior lineman left that was going to visit in June, and that was Darius. OU, if they had missed with him today, regardless of what goes on with the tackle prospects that we've been, obsessively tracking, OU probably needed at least one other interior guy to go with Owen Hollenbeck, who OU views really as a center. And now they've got him. It's probably the top guy on their board as a guard position. I mean, OU didn't offer some of the guard prospects in Texas who are sort of fringe tackle prospects that OU probably would have liked to guard. So, but they've got their guard now, and they're up to three players: Hollenbeck, Ryan Foji, and now Darius Afalava. That's a good group. It needs to be a group of 5, as we mentioned on our previous podcast with Caleb Cummings. That's where we want to see OU. We want to see OU with 5 offensive linemen. But it's a big pickup. Maybe gives OU a little momentum going into July for O-line recruiting. And it's a big win for Bill. Bill, when you hear Darius has done a number of interviews. He did an interview pre his announcement with the Sooner or Later podcast, 30 minutes. I strongly recommend that. I'll add a link to that in the notes. And he did a quick interview with Eddie and Josh from Sooner Scoop today, and really, you did a fantastic job selling their message of soul mission, holistic recruiting, not transactional recruiting. Football has an end date. We want to build you to be a complete person. We want to make sure you're getting your degree, and that you also have a chance to have some other life experiences that will help you post football days. And he was very impressed with Soul Mission and the Soul Mission going to various locations around the world, helping folks. Their mission, the mission part of the mission, sort of I wouldn't call it missionary work, but the charity work that the Sooner football team has done in various locations. Most recently, I believe, in Rio de Janeiro and Hawaii. So really, he talked about that, and he talked about the team focus. And the whole team was a team, and I think he felt very comfortable there, and that just really a great official visit again. Just knocked it out of the park and won this recruiting battle really from that decision. He had connections at Washington. He has a cousin that plays there. He obviously, Utah, the home state, does a good job building creating, developing offensive line. There are a lot of Utah offensive linemen in the pros. So Utah made a big push. But he sounded like he wanted to get a little bit away from home, try something new. And OU just fit exactly what he was looking for. But for Bill, this is a big commit. You add Darius to last year's interior class, which right now is Daniel Ekinkimi, Eugene Brooks, Josh Iasosa, and Eddie Pierre-Louis. You add Darius to that, and that's a serious group of large, powerful individuals, athletic big men who give OU, that's a lot of that's a lot of guard talent, a lot of varied, players who are, Eddie Pierre-Louis is a top 100 guy. So was Eugene Brooks. So was Daniel Akinkunmi. Josh Iasosa has a high ceiling, just a slightly longer development window, probably just because he's so new to football. And I think Darius is a top 200 type talent. That's where I would have him ranked, somewhere in the top 200, top 250. And at guard, he's just an excellent looking guard. So that's the new commit story. We've got a lot of official visits are over. We're in a dead period right now. And it will be until July 24th. And OU's going to focus on a junior sophomore event at the end of July. So even with that window being opening up, it's not going to be so focused on 2025. So there's lots of players making decisions coming up in the next week or so. Tomorrow, in terms of upcoming commitments that are OU or OU adjacent, we have Dasan Braum tomorrow. He's not choosing OU. I thought he was going to Oregon based upon everybody said he was going to Oregon. Now it looks like maybe he may be changing that and possibly choosing Tennessee. His girlfriend is a soccer player signing with Tennessee, so maybe that's going to be a big win for Tennessee. It's odd Tennessee's doing so well in tight end recruiting because their scheme is like OU's scheme. It hasn't really featured the tight end. Tennessee's not been really featuring the tight end either. So that's a weird variable there. But Tennessee's having a good recruiting class. They're top 10 in the country, just like OU. They've had a couple of big wins recently, so they're trending high. So, they're going to get Dasan Braum, and he's an excellent two-way tight end that would give Josh Heupel a weapon to use in his offense down the road. So if that actually happens for him. So then we have a trio of commits on SEC Day, which is July 1st. A lot of SEC stuff happening coming up with OU joining the SEC officially. There's a big SEC Day, parties on campus, SEC Network on campus doing live events, the Paul Feinbaum show on campus in Norman. So lots of stuff going on. But on that day, we've got 3 commits happening that should involve OU to one level, one way or another. The first, I'm going to mention probably the last, based upon him being a West Coast guy, time-wise. I don't have date times yet for these. They are going to occur on July 1st, but I don't have time of day yet. So the first one's Mark Hennicher from California, teammate of Jaden O'Neal at Narbonne, California. Looks like he's down to SMU and OU. And the variable here is, does OU want to add another linebacker to the class, and who do they want that to be? Because Hennicher is ranked a 4-star by One Service, but he is primarily a Mike linebacker. And if you think Marcus James is going to be a big Mike for OU, which he could be, then maybe you'd want a slightly different linebacker for the second spot, someone who's a little more will linebacker-like. That's at least one way to think. That's one way OU could view this. And with Zach Alley, it's been strange in terms of getting linebackers on campus and who does he really want. So does OU really want a Hennicher for this last linebacker spot? Are they willing to fight SMU, who is recruiting a Hennicher's cousin, who's a rush end from California? Are they willing to fight SMU for Hanichor? It's hard to know. You'd think if this was a true head-to-head battle, OU could win that, but I'm not sure that's really going to be the case. So we'll see how that thing plays out. I like a Hanichor on film, but he's a Mike linebacker. That's what he is. At least that's what he's showing currently. So we'll see how that shakes out. Then I think the most contested commitment of the day is going to be Smith Arogbo, the defensive end from the Houston area, the four-star, super highly rated by On3. On3 has him way higher rated than the other services. And this is an OU Texas battle, and it's really too close to call. Texas took some hits today in their defensive tackle recruiting. They lost both Josh Sharma and Myron Charles, two very talented defensive tackles that I think UT fans thought they were going to get to bolster their D-line. They missed those guys, so they're probably not in a very good mood in terms when it comes to D-line recruiting. And if OU could beat them for Arogbo, they'll be in an even worse mood. The third guy is Cortez Mills, the wide receiver from Florida, who visited like 2 weeks now. It is from today with Marcus Harris, the wide receiver who verbaled. And it looks like it's an OU Clemson battle. We're starting to see some OU forecasts, which possibly means OU will end up with 5 wide receivers again. If Cortez verbals, we'll see how things shake out with the OU wide receiver group moving forward. But if he does, at this point in time, that would be 5 verbals back-to-back years, which would be a little weird to see OU absorb all that and see how that goes. But that's where they are currently. So that's July 1st. Then he's listing right now July 4th as his commitment date, and that would be Mekhi Williams-Lee, the defensive tackle from Atlanta, who visited on the 14th as well. Now, OU's taken some hits at D-line with Christian Evans and Cole Brewer. So, and I'm not sure they're really still in play here for Williams-Lee. If they had moved off him, could they move back in based upon some other data points? It's hard to know. He didn't list a whole bunch of schools. He hasn't listed I can't find a top 4 list for him. So OU is one of the places he visited. I would think maybe NC State or Colorado is actually where he's going to end up. But, if OU makes a push, maybe they can make a late push. Todd Bates says, I want you to be part of this class, and maybe that works. Then on July 6th, we have Omarion Robinson, the safety from Arkansas. Looks like an Oregon-Arkansas OU battle. Omarion's profile just blew up over the last couple of days because he won the defensive back MVP award at the recent Rivals 5-star event, where he was the best coverage DB. He's a safety. He's a safety for the Suitor scheme. You heard Caleb and I raving about him on our last long-form pod. If you haven't listened to that, please go back and take a listen. We really talked in depth about Omarion a little bit. So I would say this is an OU-Oregon fight, and I think we might get news back and forth of him. I think his decision point is it's pretty tight, and we may hear back and forth of different schools thinking they've jumped ahead and fallen off. We may hear a little bit of like the Max Granville situation, where we've got 3 schools fighting, and we're getting kind of different information from each one, and we won't quite know what's going to happen until he makes his decision. It could be that tight based upon everything that's kind of out there. Oregon doesn't want to give him up. They had a good visit. OU had a great visit with him too. So it's a tight recruiting race because everyone's kind of realizing Arkansas badly needs an in-state win. Their beleaguered coach, needs to be able to needs to put some recruiting wins on the board, so that makes it harder for them to fire him. So we'll see what happens with Omarion Robinson, but it's basically a week away. It'll be on the Saturday of July 6th. So that's the dates that we have right now that are confirmed. Right now, it looks like we may have a break in the 4 offensive tackle kind of recruiting gridlock. They've all taken their visits. They can't take any more visits until this fall. OU's involved with at least 3 of them. Who knows where they stand with Ty Haywood until he provides an interview with a status update on what he's doing. It's hard to tell, but we may have our first break in that, and Lamont Rogers possibly making a decision in the next sort of 10 days. And that information is coming from the OU Insider podcast. So that was from Brandon Drum. I want to give him full credit for kind of having that scoop on their podcast. So if that's the case, right now that looks like I would guess that would be Texas is not involved. A&M's trying to stay in that battle, but it probably would be down to OU Missouri. And his mom had a great visit to OU. OU's been much heavily. He's visited OU more often, been heavily connected with OU. Since last November when he came up for the TCU game, and he came up several times last summer. So familiarity, if familiarity is an edge, and sometimes it can be, sometimes it's not, then maybe OU's got an edge here. And if OU can get Lamont Rogers in the next 10 days, that will make the rest of the offensive tackle recruiting very, very interesting. So let's just get to them and do a quick update. When it comes to the other tackles, Michael Fasusi, the Louisville tackle, OU just offered his teammate, Sean Hutton, a preferred walk-on. Sean's a 6'3", 300-pound center prospect. Eric Wren being kind of the classic comp that most people would make, the preferred walk-on who became the starting center for Oklahoma before Creed Humphrey took over during the Lincoln Riley run. I've watched his film. Hutton's good. He's a block. He's a force in the middle. It's hard to move. He's not getting knocked backwards at any point in time. So, there's definitely, there's a lot to work with there. As a preferred walk-on, he's not, that guy's never going to amount to anything. 2-3 years in the Schmitty car wash, he could easily be a second or third team center and also provide some reps at guard. He's a big kid. That 6'2", 6'3" height's is real. He's not 6 foot. Every photo you see of him, he that looks to be legit. His dad's an OU grad, so OU had kind of an in there. He's, like I said, he's teammates with Fasusi. Will that play a role? I don't know. It certainly can't hurt. On Fasusi, it looked like OU really nailed their visit. Friend of the show, Daniel Akin-Kimi, as his host, did just a fantastic job. And OU, with the Fasusi family, who have been to OU a number of times. Remember, Fasusi's been like Rogers. Fasusi's been to Norman a number of times before everything kind of blew up, recruiting-wise in sort of February, March this year. So Fasusi's got a lot of connections with the Sooners. He's the one that posted the photo of him and Bill Biedenbauer, where he's calling Bill the GOAT. He's giving very positive interviews to OU sites. Texas was the presumed favorite. Like, he's going to Texas because he's really the only one of the offensive linemen that Texas seems to have a shot at. They're getting nervous. They're getting a little bit worried. They're not the confident folks they were previously. He took his official visit to UT. He had a good time. It was a good visit. But it just doesn't seem like it carried the same punch as the OU visit. So will that wear off in a couple of weeks? In a month? It could. We don't have a date on Fasusi. So we wonder if perhaps maybe when the open period in July, maybe he'll try and give OU and Texas, unofficial visits, one last check-in between his two favorites and see if that can break the deadlock. We'll see. I know he wants to make a decision before his senior year. So the only question is, does he take advantage of the August dead period time frame to, have, when the coaches are all tied up, the old college coaches are tied up with their own stuff. Does he use that window to kind of, make a final decision on where he wants to go? Andrew Babalola, the very gifted Kansas tight offensive tackle, again, seems to have had a great visit to Norman. Again, Daniel Ekinkimi was his host and seems to have done a fantastic job. No date yet from Andrew. So we're not sure where that goes. It almost looks like maybe Lamont's going to decide. Maybe Lamont and his advisors, his family, maybe they've come to the conclusion they should strike first. And if they really want to be in OU's class and have Lamont trained and developed by Bill Biedenbaugh, that maybe they should strike while the other guys are still considering what they're doing. That's a possible theory. I don't have an inside source with Lamont to tell you that's what's going on. It's just something I sort of came up with. So Ty Haywood, everyone thinks he's going to Alabama. The top three was FSU, Bama, and OU. He didn't visit OU in June. No date yet. Until we have some other change of news, some other bit of data, OU's on the outside looking, on the outside at this point with Ty Haywood, unless something changes, which is not current. Haywood doesn't do social media. He's notoriously difficult for recruiting services to talk to. So we're not really going to get an update here anytime soon, I think. We may just get notification. He may choose one of the services to talk to, probably one of the national services, probably On3, I'd guess. Maybe Chad Simmons, and just and say, yeah, I'm announcing on this date. And if that's in June, if that's in the next couple of weeks, then yeah, he's going to Alabama or FSU, and I would bet almost everything on Alabama. So that's the tackle recap. What other targets and what other news is out there? So OU's really, the number of targets out there is really getting reduced. There's not if OU loses out on Marion Robinson right now, there's not a backup safety target. There's no tight end targets left. Brom is going to choose a team. Lincoln Cure isn't considering OU and is probably going to choose, I think he's going on July 1st too. He'll choose Kansas State, I'd imagine. Although Oregon, now that they're not getting Brom, maybe they'll make a big move for him. But regardless, it's not an OU recruiting. It's only adjacent to OU. So the most obvious target who could be in the OU fold is obviously Cade Piatrak from Fargo, North Dakota. He visited K-State on the 21st. That visit seems to have landed a little bit. So it looks like an OU K-State battle maybe, but there was still lots of forecasts for OU. I'm not quite sure what Cade is waiting on. He and his family have some a date that's important to them, or a date they can decide, but we'll see what's going on there. He could, and again, he literally just could commit and tell a service he doesn't do social media really. He could just commit, tell a service he's committed, and that's how we find out, kind of in an old school fashion. Brandon Brown, the defensive tackle from Florida, who's verbal to UT. There's no real update there. I don't think he's going to end up as a Sooner. Texas just lost 2 defensive tackles today, as I mentioned. So they're obviously going to want to keep Brown because they're down in D-line recruiting. They're not going to want another loss there. LSU probably is maybe the greater threat to flip Brown than OU, but we'll see. I don't have a substantive update on Christian Jones, the linebacker from Nebraska. He visited OU. He seemed to have a good time. He can't visit anywhere else officially for July. I don't think he can unofficially visit a place if he wants to do that. So he'd have to wait until the end of the month when the last week opens up. So I don't know. There's no information on a timetable from him. If Hanachor chooses SMU, I'd imagine OU would move. And OU, if OU's sort of, I don't want to say letting a Hanachor go to SMU, But if that does happen, maybe you see OU make a greater push with Christian Jones to try and make him the linebacker in the class. And Jones would be kind of a more of a complement to Marcus James there. If you're going to make Marcus James this big middle linebacker, Jones' profile fits more of a will. He could be 6'3", 225, 230, with really good speed. So no decision there. Nothing. No substantive update there from Christian Jones. Do not have a substantive update on defensive tackle Floyd Boucard either. He's still tracking a mid-July decision. Miami, USC, OU, some combination there of a final three. I don't think we have a clear idea of a leader at this point. Miami's picked up some big commits that weren't D-line from other positions, so they would seem to still be in line and need Boucard. Boucard has jumped up in profile for OU with the previous D-line decisions I've referenced by Cole Brewer and Christian Evans, especially if they don't get Brandon Brown or they don't get Mekhi Williams-Lee. You need another defensive tackle in this class, and Boucard is the best one on the board, regardless of the other guys. And you don't seem to be getting anybody else. A D-line class of just Kamori Moore and Trenton Wilson is probably at least one defensive tackle short. So that's all the updates and news that we have in recruiting right now. I will record another podcast on Monday night after the trio of July 1st decisions to give you guys some context on what's happened with that. So thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and don't forget to leave a rating. Again, please visit patreon.com/Sooners360-817 to subscribe for more recruiting content and to support this podcast. Thanks, everyone.